I would never have thought that a normal evening at home would be the beginning of the end of my perfect life. I always had the feeling that my life was going well. I had a wonderful wife, Alice, 2 beautiful children, and a stable job. We lived in a cozy house in the suburbs of Chicago, where every corner was filled with memories of our family. Life seemed so predictable, and therefore safe. And it was this predictability that was destroyed in an instant. That evening I decided to set up a new tablet I had bought for the kids. They were always asking for something new to play and study with, and I thought this gift would be a great surprise. As a tech-savvy person, I quickly set up an account, and the tablet automatically synchronized with our family cloud storage. This was not surprising, as we all use the same system to store photos, documents, and videos. While the tablet was updating the data, I started looking through the photos that were automatically uploaded. These were ordinary family moments, birthday celebrations, trips to the countryside, even everyday photos, such as children playing in the yard. Everything was so familiar, so ours. But then I noticed something unusual. Among all these ordinary photos, there were new ones that didn't fit into the context. At first, I didn't even realize what I was looking at. One of the pictures showed Alice in an evening dress I had never seen before, in a luxurious hotel room. Another showed her smiling, but not at me. She was looking at a man whose face was only half visible. This picture was taken as if someone was trying to hide the true purpose of the photo. But the context was obvious. I froze. At first, I was in denial. Maybe it was something from the past, an old photo that had been accidentally uploaded, but the dates on the photo said otherwise. These pictures were taken just a month ago when Alice said she had gone to a work conference. My heart sank. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Flipping through the photos one by one, I was looking for some kind of excuse. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. But the evidence was too clear. Each subsequent photo confirmed that this was not just a business trip. All those hotel rooms, luxurious dinners, and most importantly, her eyes, the eyes I once thought were mine. I have always believed in our trust. Alice and I had lived together for 12 years, and I was sure I knew her better than anyone else. We went through so many moments together, from the joy of our first meeting to the difficulties that came our way. I had built my life around her, and the thought that she could hide something so meaningful from me seemed impossible. I put the tablet away, but I couldn't calm down. My head was filled with questions. Why? What did I do wrong? What did I miss? Were there any signs that I just didn't pay attention to? Memories began to replay in my mind like an old movie. I tried to find moments that might suggest that something was wrong. Was there a change in her behavior? Was she becoming more distant? I remembered how she had been staying late at work a lot lately, justifying it with important projects. But isn't that normal for modern life? The next morning, I couldn't concentrate on work. All day I had those photos in front of my eyes. I started to remember all her business trips over the past few months. Alice always said it was just work, and I never doubted her words. But now every detail seemed suspicious. I started to put the puzzle together in my head, and the picture was getting more and more frightening. In the evening, I decided to check the cloud storage more closely. I discovered that the photos had coordinates of the places where they were taken. A hotel in the center of New York, a restaurant famous for its romantic atmosphere. I checked these addresses on the internet. They were all places I would never have visited without her company. These were not our places. I didn't want to believe the obvious, but the evidence was becoming more and more convincing. Then I noticed the synchronized messages. My hands were shaking as I opened the texting app. And there it was, her correspondence with a certain Robert. They were exchanging jokes, flirting, and worst of all, discussing their plans for future meetings. Everything was so obvious that I had no room for doubt. Reading these messages, I felt anger boiling inside me. But it was not only anger, it was a betrayal that cut deep into my heart. I always believed that Alice and I were a team, that we could overcome everything together. But it turned out that she was playing a double game, and I didn't even realize it. I spent the whole evening in my studio trying to collect my thoughts. I couldn't decide what to do next. Should I tell her right away? Or wait and collect more evidence? But was there any point in gathering evidence if I already knew the truth? My emotions were too strong for me to make a logical decision. I was filled with doubts. I tried to understand how this could have happened. Was it my fault? Did I not pay enough attention to her? Or was it simply her choice that I could not influence? In each case, I felt like I was losing control of my own life. It was the longest night of my life. I barely slept, thinking about what was coming next. My perfect picture was shattered into thousands of pieces, and I didn't know how to put them back together. In the morning, I looked at Alice, who seemed so calm, as if nothing had happened. She was smiling, drinking coffee, talking about her plans for the day. And I was sitting across from her and couldn't believe that this was the person I loved with all my heart. I felt like a stranger in my own life. My head was full of chaotic thoughts, but I tried to keep myself together. The days after I saw the photos and read the correspondence were a blur. I tried to hide my emotions, but something broke inside me. Every time Alice looked at me, her eyes seemed normal, but now I saw something new in them, a falsity. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but this thought haunted me. At some point, I decided to collect more evidence. It was as if an unknown force was forcing me to make sure that what I had seen was not a dream or a fiction. I seized the moment when Alice left her phone unattended. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hardly concentrate. On her phone, I found not only new messages, but also photos that further confirmed what I already knew. Robert had written to her not only about their plans, but also about his feelings. He called her the one, and wrote about how he wanted to be with her forever. My hands were shaking as I closed the phone and put it back on the table. Pictures appeared in my head of me facing her, asking her, why? But for now, I remained a silent observer, trying to decide how to proceed. At that moment, I realized that silence was no longer an option. I could not live with this lie. One evening, when the children were already asleep, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and waited for Alice to return from the shower. She looked relaxed, even happy. This contrasted with my state. I could feel the tension building up inside me, about to break through. When she sat down across from me, I started to speak. Without embellishment, without preparation. I told her everything I had found. Photos, correspondence, details that she may have thought would remain hidden forever. Her reaction was unexpected. She did not object. She was silent, her eyes downcast. This silence spoke more than any words. I don't remember how long that moment lasted. It seemed like time had stopped. After a long pause, she finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost indifferent. She said that she was sorry for what had happened, but she could not help herself. She mentioned how she had started to feel unhappy in our marriage. She talked about the lack of attention, the fact that we had grown apart over time. And then Robert came along and made her feel wanted again. Her words were painful. Every sentence was like a knife to my heart. I couldn't believe that after all the years together she had chosen this path. I couldn't understand why she hadn't talked about it before. Why didn't she give me a chance to fix it? I didn't scream. I didn't want our children to wake up and witness this scene. But everything was raging inside me. There were many questions in my head, but the main one remained unanswered. What now? Do we have a future after this? Can I forgive her? Alice suggested that we go for a consultation with a family psychologist. She said she wanted to save our marriage, that she regretted her actions. But was it possible to save what had already been destroyed? Was it possible to regain trust after that? The next few weeks were the hardest in my life. We decided to try therapy, but each session was like an open wound. I felt that she needed this whole process more than I did. She wanted to justify herself, and I was just trying to figure out how to move on. During this period, I began to notice changes in myself. I became more withdrawn, avoided communication with friends, and even children. It seemed to me that I was losing not only my wife, but also myself. I no longer recognized the John the First used to be. The man who was confident in his life, in his family, now felt empty. One of the moments I will never forget happened during my next therapy session. The psychologist asked me if I could imagine our life in 5 years. I thought about it. There was no picture before my eyes. I didn't see us together. I saw only fragments that could not be put back together. Alice kept saying that she loved me and wanted to keep the family together. But I no longer believed her words. Her love seemed fake to me, like those smiles in the photos I found. And the more she tried to justify herself, the more I felt disgusted. One evening, when the children were at my grandmother's house, I finally told her that I couldn't live like this anymore. I can't be with a person who betrayed me. I can't look her in the eye every day and try to pretend that everything is normal. It was not an easy decision, but I realized that it was the only way to get myself back. We agreed on a divorce. It was a long and painful process, but I knew there was no other way out. The hardest part was explaining it to the children. They did not understand why their mom and dad could no longer live together. I tried to be as honest as possible, but at the same time not to blame Alice. The children should not have been held hostage to our situation. After the divorce, I started to slowly rebuild my life. I moved to another house, closer to work. I started to devote more time to myself and my hobbies. I enrolled in photography courses, something I had long dreamed of, but always put off. It became a kind of therapy for me. I began to see the beauty in simple things and find joy in the little things. Alice and I stayed in touch only through the children. She tried to maintain a good relationship with me, but I couldn't forget what had happened. Her betrayal left a mark in my heart forever. But at the same time, I realized that it was an important part of my journey. It made me rethink my life and my values. Now, a few years after these events, I can say that I have become stronger. I have learned to trust myself and appreciate what I have. My life is not the same as it was before, but it has become real. And if you ask me if I have forgiven Alice, my answer will be, I have, but I will never forget. This became my lesson about trust, about love, and that sometimes it is better to let go than to hold on to something that has already lost its meaning. Life after divorce is like learning to walk again, but without support. I always thought that the worst thing about infidelity was the discovery of the fact, but it turned out that the real challenge comes afterwards. You are left alone with your feelings, with pain, with doubts that roll in waves, with the desire to understand what you did wrong. But at the same time, life goes on, and whether you like it or not, you have to move forward. My move to a new house was a symbol of a new beginning, but at the same time a reminder of everything I had lost. This house had no history, no memories. It was just an empty space, and it was my task to fill it with something real. Luckily, my children helped me with this. Their smiles, their joy at simple things. That's what kept me going. I decided to stay as involved in their lives as possible. They were my priority, and I couldn't let my pain become their burden. We spent every weekend together, riding bikes, going to the movies, cooking dinner. I saw how sad they were that our family was no longer together, and it tore me apart. But I also saw how they were adapting, how they were learning to live in new conditions. It gave me strength. Work became my refuge. I immersed myself in projects, often staying late, trying to fill this inner emptiness. But over time, I realized that it was just an escape. The more I worked, the further away from myself I got. One day, a colleague of mine suggested that I join a support group for people who have experienced betrayal and divorce. At first, I was skeptical of the idea. Why would I tell strangers about my problems? Why? But something in me pushed me to go. This group has become a real salvation for me. Communicating with people who were going through the same thing as me made me realize that I was not alone. Their stories were different, but the pain they were going through was very similar. We supported each other, shared our experiences and advice. It was a place where I was understood without words. One evening, after the meeting, I stopped at the lake. It was my favorite place since childhood, but I hadn't been here for a long time. I looked at the water, which was calm as a mirror, and thought about my life. I realized that all this time I had been looking for answers outside, but not looking inside myself. I asked myself, who am I now? What do I want from this new life? I decided it was time to focus on myself. After years of prioritizing my family, I realized that I had forgotten about my own dreams, desires, and goals. One of the first things I did was to resume the hobbies I once loved. Photography was one of them. I bought a new camera and started spending my weekends traveling around the neighborhood looking for the perfect shots. It helped me not only to distract myself, but also to see the world from a different perspective. Over time, I became more confident. My determination to change my life attracted new people to me. I met people who shared my interests and with whom I could talk about anything. One of these people was Amanda, a woman I met at a photography course. She was smart, interesting, and had an incredible sense of humor. Her ease and sincerity won me over. We started chatting, exchanging ideas for photos, and later it grew into something more. Amanda knew about my story, and I knew about hers. She too had been through a difficult relationship, but her outlook on life was full of optimism. She showed me that after a fall, you can always get back up if you really want to. Our relationship developed slowly, but naturally. We took our time because we were both afraid of making mistakes. But with each meeting, I realized that I felt happy with her. Amanda did not try to replace Alice or fill the void. She became a person who helped me rediscover myself. A few years after the divorce, I no longer recognized myself. I became stronger, more confident, happier. My life was not perfect, but it was real. I learned to accept my mistakes, my failures, and not be afraid to move forward. I realized that betrayal is not the end, but only one of the stages of life that can become the beginning of something new. Now, when I look at my children who are growing up and becoming independent, I see that they too went through this difficult situation with dignity. They have learned an important lesson. Even when life is destroyed, it can always be rebuilt. And I am proud to be an example for them of how to fight and move on. To conclude this chapter of my life, I would like to say, don't be afraid to start over. Don't be afraid to look for yourself, even if it means letting go of the past. Because true happiness comes when you are ready to accept it. And for that you need to be free from pain, from resentment, and from fear. And remember, every end is just the beginning of something new. The new chapter of my life continued to unfold with such unexpected beauty that I could not have even imagined a few years ago. After going through the pain of betrayal and the complexity of divorce, I found myself on the threshold of another existence, where every day was a reminder of the power of rebirth. My life with Amanda became filled with small rituals that added a sense of stability and joy. We would cook breakfast together on weekends, go for morning jogs, or sit on the terrace with a cup of coffee watching the sunrise. These moments were simple, but in them I found something extremely important, a sense of peace and harmony. Amanda has become not only a partner, but also a friend who is always ready to listen and support me. The children, who once had a hard time accepting change, now seemed happy. They got along with Amanda, and there was even a certain trust between them that amazed me. We created an atmosphere where everyone felt needed and accepted. I think the key to this was sincerity. I didn't try to replace their mother or force them to accept Amanda. We just gave them time and love, and it worked. However, even in this idyllic period of life, there was still room for challenges. My past still reminded me of itself sometimes. One day, I received a message from Alice asking to meet again to discuss our relationship. At first, I hesitated. Past conversations with her had often turned into accusations or manipulations. But this time, her words sounded sincere. She said she wanted to apologize for everything and ask for forgiveness. The meeting with her was difficult. We were sitting in a coffee shop, and I felt a wave of memories rolling in. Alice looked different. Her face had lost the confidence I had always seen in her. She was talking about how many mistakes she had made and how sorry she was for her actions. She apologized for betraying me and our family. Her words were hard for me, but at the same time, I felt the last fragments of resentment in me begin to melt away. I told her I forgave her, but explained that our past was behind us. I thanked her for finding the strength to admit her mistakes. This conversation was the final chord in our story for me. For the first time in many years, I felt like I could really let go. When I returned home, I shared my feelings with Amanda. She supported me, as she always does, and told me she was proud of the way I handled it. Her understanding and support were incredibly valuable to me. It reminded me how important it is to have someone around who accepts you with all your wounds and weaknesses. After that, I started thinking more about the future. The life we created with Amanda was wonderful, but I felt like I could do even more. I had always dreamed of owning my own business, and now it was time to realize that dream. Together with a friend, we started working on the idea of creating a photography studio that would not only offer services but also organize workshops for amateurs. Photography became more than a hobby for me. It was a way to express my feelings and vision of the world. Opening the studio was a new milestone in my life. It was difficult, but at the same time extremely exciting. Amanda supported me every step of the way, helped with the organization, and even took part in some of the filming. I could see our efforts bring results, and it filled me with pride. The studio became a place where people could discover their talent and find inspiration. I saw people who had never held a camera in their hands come to us, and a few months later their work looked like masterpieces. It was a reminder that everyone has the potential to change and grow if given the chance. One day, I organized an exhibition of my work where I presented a series of photographs taken at different times in my life. Each photo had its own story, and I shared them with the visitors. People came up to me and thanked me for opening a part of my world. It was the moment when I felt that I was back to being the John who believes in himself and what he does. Life never ceases to amaze me. I realized that even after the deepest losses, you can find something that will become your new meaning. My relationship with Amanda, my studio, my children, all of these have become part of the new life I've built from scratch. I am no longer afraid of the future. I know that there are still many challenges ahead, but now I'm ready for them. If I have learned anything over the years, it is that every obstacle is an opportunity for growth. Every betrayal, every pain is a lesson that makes us stronger. And most importantly, you should never be afraid to start over, because it is in new beginnings that we find ourselves.